Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so the first thing I want to just cover really briefly is the code of conduct. As you know, we're really trying to create an enjoyable and enriching experience for everyone. And so there's a few rules of thumb that we like to go by. One is to be friendly and be polite, be welcoming, be respectful, be kind to others. So those are the general code of conduct. If you have any questions or want to read the full code of conduct, please visit the Bazaar website for that information. I also wanted to just briefly give a shout out to the Research Bazaar Planning Committee members. As you can see, there's a bunch of units on campus that all generously donate the time and energy of their staff and faculty to make the Research Bazaar happen. And without those folks, this just wouldn't be possible. And likewise, I also wanted to give a shout out to our sponsors who also this Research Bazaar wouldn't be possible without. So thank you to our sponsors. A reminder that in addition to our scheduled events, the Bazaar also hosts an exhibit that brings together art and science, very cool stuff. This exhibit will be featured throughout the Bazaar in the locations shown on this map right here in the Discovery Building. And I encourage you to try to find the different art pieces that are part of the Bazaar. In terms of the schedule, you'll notice that we are on Thursday, February 23rd, the second and last day of the Research Bazaar. This is the career panel. And after the career panel ends at 2:45, there'll be a brief break and the closing reception and closing sessions will follow, and that'll be in person. And then one final housekeeping bit is that, and this is actually a request for the participants and the attendees in the audience. If you have your computer handy, go ahead and open this website, slido.com. And I believe Jason's going to put that into the chat if he hasn't already. So slido.com is a pretty cool website that will allow you to ask questions of our panelists today. In order to get into it, you'll need to enter the code panel23. So again, that's panel23. Once you enter that code, you'll get a box where you can input any questions you might have for the panelists today. And at the end, Sharif will ask some of those questions, as many as possible on your behalf. And he'll go over a little bit more about what that's gonna like, what that process will be in a minute. And so on that note, I think I'm gonna hand it over to you, Sharif.
Thanks so much, Casey. And once again, welcome to the 2023 Data Science Research Bazaar Career Panel. I am Sharif Issaka, a data scientist with the Department of Surgery at UW-Madison, and I'll be moderating today's session. Joining us is Jason Struck, a statistical consultant for the Social Sciences Computing Cooperative, who will serve as our technical support. Nancy Sheenan is a program coordinator for a crowdsourced participatory science program that tracks wildlife migration. She will be moderating the live session along with Sarah Stevens. Sarah is the director of Data Science Hub, the team hosting the Bazaar. So the purpose of today's panel is to provide students and professionals with an understanding of the field of data science and the opportunity to ask questions about career paths. We are fortunate to have 4 experts in the field who have agreed to share their experiences and knowledge with us. They are also eager to answer your questions, so please share them as you have them. So now to introduce our panelists, first up on the panel list is Emily Robinson. Emily is a senior data scientist who's worked previously at Warby Parker, Etsy, and DataCamp, and is currently serving as an expert witness. Along with Jacqueline Knowles, she wrote the book, Build a Career in Data Science, and made the accompanying podcast by the same name. Next is Michael Sexton. Michael recently graduated from UW-Madison in the spring of 2022, where he double majored in computer engineering and computer science. He currently works for IBM as a data scientist and software developer, working directly with product engineers to improve the performance and reliability of IBM's mainframes. Next is Alex Sado. Alex is the founder of an AI workforce development company. He previously led NVIDIA's group to deploy the first AI GPUs on the cloud and advised the African Union on its AI strategy for this decade. And finally is Eleanor Anderson. Eleanor leads the City of Madison's Data and Innovation team, which furthers data-informed decisions through data policy and analysis. She has experience in the public and private sectors. I would again like to sincerely thank the panelists for joining us today. And I, for one, am very excited to hear about their experiences working in this field. So the way this will work is I will ask a question and call upon each of the panelists individually to provide their response. Jason would also put each of the questions in the chat. Panelists, please feel free to raise your hand at any time to add something to what you've already said or make a follow-up comment. We hope that you will have your questions for the panelists, and when you do, please type your question into Slido, link provided in the chat also. Our Zoom host, Jason, will record your questions, and towards the end, I will ask as many of the questions as possible on your behalf. So to jump right in with the first question, which would go in the order of Emily, Michael, Alex, and Eleanor. And here's the question. Data scientists take on a variety of roles and responsibilities. Could you please describe your current role and main responsibilities? Tell us what are the range of tasks that you undertake on an average day.
Sure. So right now I'm working on an expert witness on a legal case. This was not something I ever expected to do with my data science skills, but I was approached by a company who's being sued over trade secrets claims. It's a company that offers A/B testing for in-store, like retail stores or other places versus, online only A/B testing. And so what you do as an expert witness is I review the materials in the case, including the depositions. I write a report on my opinions about, the question involved here, which is, are these things trade secrets? I'm getting deposed in a few weeks, and then I'll also testify if it goes to trial. But I wouldn't say that's very representative. So I'll also just briefly say at my last job at Warby Parker, I worked on a centralized data science team working with teams across the company. And there, the range of tasks, I did some machine learning and deep learning problems. So, one day I might be figuring out how can we use AWS SageMaker, their machine learning platform, to train a model on millions of images. Another day I may be mentoring one of my teammates on how to use, a certain R package or make an R package. Another day I'm meeting with stakeholders. So, really it's kind of a variety of things, of definitely some heads down work, some stakeholder meetings, and then also working with my teammates, sometimes learning things from them, sometimes sharing what I've learned, sometimes one-on-one help. But that's one of the things I enjoy, is that there's really a variety of tasks, and data science is a pretty broad field. So lots of new things to try and learn.
Thanks so much, Emily. Michael?
So thank you for the question. I'm working at IBM as a data scientist right out of college. So it's a pretty interesting day to day, especially with the pandemic. So I start with, I'm really a data scientist for hire within the company, and all of our engineers, they have a lot of data coming back from the field and all of our mainframes and servers deployed in the field, and they don't really know what to do with it. So they come to me and my team, and we help digest the data and get it to them in the format that they need and that they can use. And I've also engaged in machine learning projects from the conception phase all the way through to the execution, giving it back to the stakeholders. So my day-to-day, I work with a lot of technologies, but some of the languages, to give you guys an idea, starts off with Python, SQL, Java, JavaScript, XML. But the main thing is always to try to keep learning new things so you can continue working on cool things.
Right. Thanks so much, Michael. Alex?
Thank you very much, Sharif. Over the course of my career, I've bounced from being very technical, building full stack development across the websites, and also building AI models, to now where I'm more on the business side. Today, I'm a founder of a company called Ahura AI, like you mentioned before. And so I now live in the space of defining or identifying problems that we would like to solve, figuring out a vision for where we want to go with it, and then translating that into a message that our data scientists and AI researchers can understand and would deliver on. A simple example is over the past month or two, the rest of the market became very much aware of large language models, LLMs, right? The most popular one being ChatGPT-3. And now they are aware of that. But us internally, we have to figure out what do we want to do with this, right? Looking at ChatGPT-3 or Nemo from NVIDIA or Riva, there's so many tools out there. It's not just ChatGPT-3, and they're all usable for different applications. And so we have to look at two big buckets. One is internally, how do we want to use these tools to be 10 times faster? And externally, how do we build it into our end user application so that our users are able to meet their objectives faster? So it's pretty exciting.
Right. Thanks so much, Alex. Eleanor?
Thank you. So I lead the City of Madison's data team. And the data team is a central resource, and we call ourselves the data leaders, nurturers, and doers. So that means we work on data governance and policy. We work on data analysis projects across the organization. And we also do what I call data cheerleading. We just want to plug all the gaps and help people help themselves when it comes to data. And so as the manager of that team, I'm responsible for making all that move forward. So I work with all 27 of our city departments. So a big feature of my job is lots of constant learning and variety, which is something that I love. I might get to go from talking about the most efficient way to plow snow in the morning to talking about long-term city development with our planners in the afternoon. And something that I also really like about my job is that working for the city, I really get to work in my community and I really get to see the impact. And given the nature of city services, my work is very human-centric. So I'm often working on problems about people with people. So some of what that means in terms of my day-to-day, on the policy side, a lot of that is convening the right people in the right room to talk about the issues at hand, kind of drafting solutions, sharing them with those people again, iterating until we get to a place we like. Some issues are issues around data privacy. So the state of Wisconsin has very strong open records laws. There's a presumption that it is good for the public to know a lot of the information about what we do, which I think is great, but there are some things that maybe it would be sensitive to share, like for instance, about our employees. Another example is that so a big project that my team has been working on, we've made the first citywide guide for users at all kind of levels of data use across the city, best practices and standards. And now we're putting the final touches on our change management plan, which is like, do we have a realistic plan for actually getting people to use this guide? What if they don't like it? What if it doesn't cover a certain situation? And to show them that we're serious, we really need to consider all these questions. In terms of data analysis, I'm rarely fingers to keys anymore. But I will talk with my team members about the approach that they're taking, about what they're finding, about how to interpret those results. And I couldn't do that without my technical background. But I spend a lot of time being what I almost think of as a translator. So, we are a small technical team working with a large organization of mainly non-technical people. And so they will often come to us and sometimes they know exactly what they want us to do. More often, they sort of have a feeling about ways that data could help them. And so we help translate that into a scoped project. We want to make sure we're asking the right question, we're asking it the right way, we're doing it ethically, we have permission to use all the data, et cetera. And then on the back end, to an analyst, it often feels like the project is over when you've built your model. But really, in many ways, it's just beginning. So what is that model telling you to do? What is the answer here? Do you want to spend more money on that thing? Should you do more of it? Should you do less of it? What does that mean? And to give an example from pretty early in my career, I had a quick question. I was working for a transit agency at the time, and the question was to use, to look at operator absenteeism. And so I made a graph with like lots of lines on it. And I said, if you look at like the distance between the 80th percentile and the 90th percentile, and you can see that like this is caused by a small number of people. And they were like, I don't want to look at the distance between lines. Couldn't you have just told me it was caused by a small number of people? So, really thinking about how do we communicate with those people? So one thing that I do want to conclude this by highlighting is that, the theme here is that I work with people a lot. And there are lots of ways to do data science, all of them good, but I think that sometimes people just learning about the field feels like to be technical, that means you can't work with people. And that actually drives them away from the field because they want to work with people. And so I just want to highlight that there's a way to have those technical skills and also be very people focused.
Thanks so much, Eleanor. That's a nice segue. And thank you to the panelists too. Your responses have definitely demonstrated that broad spectrum of what it means to be a data scientist, right? From being super hands-on to be more on the people and to be more on the entrepreneurship sort of. And so thanks so much for those responses. Now the next question and the order would be Alex, Emily, Michael, and Eleanor. The question is, a lack of diversity is a well-documented problem in data science. What are some of the challenges and or opportunities that you have that have made you feel welcomed or not welcomed in this field? And what changes do you think are needed to help attract and support a more diverse group of future data science professionals? Again, starting with Alex.
Thank you very much. I was hoping to not be the first one because I wanted to hear ideas. I like to listen to thoughts on this topic from different angles, different organizations, and see what's happening, right? I've worked in several places. I've mentioned NVIDIA before. There, I was the president of the Black NVIDIA Network, and this was one of the biggest things we were trying to tackle. The biggest thing that was put on the table was pipeline. Most people thought the problem was pipeline, and they continue to go with that. What we discovered after 2 years of hitting our head on the wall on this topic is that pipeline is not the challenge. There's more of systemic blockers within almost every organization, and being able to uncover and identify what those systemic blockers are so that we don't allow them keep being blockers. Three quick ones I can share from my experience are, the first one is referrals. Referrals is typically the biggest way companies recruit people, and people typically refer people who look exactly like them or have gone to the same schools as they went to. And so with that blocks you from referring people of color. So that's the first one. The second one is around assumptions of a person's capabilities based off of biases that you might not even be aware that you have. And the third one is proof points that you search for. If you went to an Ivy League school, there probably are certain proof points that you look for that indicate to you that a person has certain capabilities. But then you don't look for proof points that are equally representative when you're talking to someone who went to a school that you've probably not heard about. So it's interesting to keep a more open mind and be aware of the systemic blockers that exist.
Thanks so much, Alex. Next is Emily.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I can sometimes get frustrated with the pipeline, especially if folks are like, oh, it's the elementary school pipeline, right? And it's like that sort of lets them off the hook for the next 15 years, right, or more. Which isn't to say there isn't something there. So I actually studied women in STEM specifically in graduate school, and there's something called the leaky pipeline, which kind of at every stage you actually do see folks dropping out. But as Alex was saying, there's a lot of systematic blockers and reasons why they do that aren't, lack of interest or lack of capability. So it's good to uncover those blockers. One thing that, I've really found in data science that interesting, and that has happened in engineering, is this great article about how in engineering, front-end engineering is seen usually as less prestigious, less difficult maybe, and also, not by coincidence, has more women in it. And we see that a little bit with data science sometimes, where the ML and AI may be more male dominated, and the analytics part, sometimes statistics as well, there are more women, even if not female dominated by any means. And that's maybe paid less and seen as less difficult. So I think we have to be a little careful of that. And one thing that I found effective is been a big part of the R community. And there was a group called R Ladies that was started a little over a decade ago now. And it was basically a meetup group starting in San Francisco for women and gender minorities interested in R. It's grown global with chapters all across the world, and just offering that community and role models has really helped think both folks entering data science, but also those kind of in it, stick with it and learn more things and see themselves, see kind of a future, have a place where they can meet folks that look like them, or they can connect to in certain ways. So I think the more we can create, I know some companies have ERGs, employee research groups. I think being able to create that can really help. But yeah, then I think the last part is just like Alex was saying, not letting your those proof points. Another one I've seen is like, oh, you must have been passionate since you were like a kid about this, right? Were you like or you have to be like a real intense nerd, or this has to be like your life, or whatnot. Or you have to have studied this in college. And I've actually seen very successful data scientists and other folks in technical fields who did not study this since they were kids, but have gone on to do amazing work. So I think it's important to realize people don't have to look a certain way or have a certain life experience to be a very strong data scientist.
Thanks so much, Emily. Michael?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what's been said so far. And as the youngest one here, I don't know if I have a great view of companies from a big perspective, but I have noticed that from my own experience that the teams that I work with directly have a lot of very old people, and then like right now start hiring again. So it seems like they just had no hiring for a long time for these kinds of roles, and have started recently, but the incoming class of people now seems to be very diverse. So I think it might be a shift in how companies think and hire for the better, at least in my experience. But I have some significant mentors that I work with, and she always just like shows me the entire field of what you can do with data science. And I think a lot of people don't know, like, they think it's very math oriented and you don't see the end product of it. So a lot of people fall out when like they see all the math and they don't see where you can go with it, which does get very difficult when I'm looking at CPU temperatures for hours on end. I'm like, why am I doing this? So the end goal is difficult sometimes to see, which might be a reason why data scientists is a lot of people don't go into it. But the more you see the end goal of things, the more you can start to enjoy it and like it more, and more people see that as well. They might join too.
Thanks so much, Michael. Eleanor?
Yeah, thank you. So before I answer this question, I want to acknowledge that I have certain privileges and don't have others. So this is all based on my personal experience. I would say that as a woman, I have worked in some environments that are very supportive and some environments that are very unsupportive. And I have heard women's careers described as jungle gyms rather than career ladders, where you go up, down, around, and around trying to find a path that will work. And I would say that that feels right to me. So the number one thing that I look for is an environment where ideas and people are respected. And I worked at a large firm, a famous one that you have definitely heard of, where I often felt that people couldn't hear my ideas until they were repeated by a man, which definitely led me to leave there pretty quickly. And I'm sure that these respectful environments can exist in many places. But for me, I personally have found really great environments in public service. And I would say that there is just an ethos that is not just lip service about how we treat each other and about what will and won't be tolerated. And I would also say that, again, just in my personal experience, that respectful environment is highly correlated to an environment that really believes in what I might call professionalism. The idea is on being the best professional that you can be and on upholding certain norms, which includes norms of respect. So again, you might find your perfect environment somewhere else, but those are two things that have worked really well for me. In terms of a diverse group of data professionals, I think everyone's had really great responses, and this is something that I've long been very interested in. And I think one answer is to have to really invest in having different kinds of pathways and to being really open to different kinds of backgrounds, and then to be committed to providing development opportunities. So sometimes you just need to hire someone who knows advanced modeling techniques from day one out of the box, and I get that. But you will then be drawing from a more limited pool of people. So, so what if you could have alongside that senior data scientist, you could have a role to do something like data cleaning or, more basic entry-level data analytics, and identify who has the potential there and train them. So for example, I worked with someone who started in a non-technical role, who had a non-traditional background, who in fact had no college degree, but it was clear that they were really quite bright and that they could really think outside the box and make connections in a way that's very impressive. And I helped them get a traineeship to learn the technical aspects of the job. So not to put down technical aspects, those are hard and they are important, but they can be learned. And I think that sort of intrinsic cleverness and out of the box thinking is really just such a tremendous asset to find. So I'd really like our industry to be open to more of that. And I think in Madison, we do have many places where that can be found, such as the data science program at the UW, other majors at the UW, and also we have Madison College.
Right. Thanks so much, Eleanor, and to all the panelists. I do think this is a very important topic. And for me, the big takeaway from everything I've been hearing from you all has been to really show unending respect, do away with assumptions, be open to people, to ideas, and also actively trying to create opportunities, even for people who do not have all the qualifications out of the box. So I do think these are great responses, and thank you all once again. I will transition to the next question, which is the last of the scripted questions. And the order for that would be Michael, Alex, Eleanor, and Emily. So Michael, to start us out, many of those attending this panel are graduate or undergraduate students who are entering the job market, and many are working professionals who are considering a shift in career. What skills, internships, or experiences are most essential for getting a data science job today?
Well, I think I can speak most to the undergraduates here, as I've just finished this process. But it's a very difficult process to get a job, especially in data science. I, around my junior year, was trying to get an internship for the following summer, hoping that I could get a good one and then get called back, the next year for a full-time position. That was the goal I was hoping for. And I must have applied to maybe 300 companies and just received rejection letter after rejection letter. And then one company called me back 6 months later and then interviewed me the next day, and I got it. So the difficult part is getting your face in front of people, because unfortunately in the world we live in right now, not many people actually read your resume. It gets through a filter, and if you don't have the right words or you're too young, it was very difficult getting an internship up to junior year because they just assume you have no experience. Even though I had projects that I'd done myself, they didn't really care. So unfortunately, you have to continue applying, and you can't apply to one company and wait for the response because you might not ever get it. I'm still getting rejection letters from jobs I applied to 2 years ago. So it's very difficult. But I was talking to my manager the other day, and he said that they had a surprising lack of professional applicants, that they actually showed up to their interviews with big gulps that they were drinking, or in a t-shirt, or just not presenting themselves in a very professional manner somehow. And that he said that they chose me because, I actually had an interesting story the day of my interview. The water was out, the internet went down, everything went wrong, but I still got myself to the interview. So that was a fun story to tell them right away. But they said that I was just excited to be there, and they said they don't see that too often, but then also very curious, because obviously I didn't have a lot of experience in this interview, but they said that I had some sort of knowledge in a lot of topics, but admitted when I didn't have any knowledge in specific topics. So the two things I can tell you, or maybe three things, is to continually apply and to try to be as excited as possible in an interview, because hopefully you'll be applying to places you are interested in. And three is to try to show that you are a professional, and that you take this seriously, and it's not like school environments anymore. It's a job. So excitement is the biggest thing when you finally do get in front of an interview, from my experience.
Right. Thanks so much, Michael. Stay excited and continue applying. I love that. Alex?
Yeah, definitely. I probably share two things. One, similar to Michael's, on the getting in, question of getting in. When I was applying after my MBA for internships, I remember doing about 10 to 15 of them and not getting any response. But after making the right kind of improvements to my resume, then getting 3 interviews and 3 jobs or 3 offers in 1 week. Right. So it was really around getting the resume to fit what the HR were looking for. That's a problem I actually think is quite silly, but yeah, HR is what HR is, and they look for what they look for. I'll just send a message here with a new tool I discovered called Hiration. We are trying to do a partnership with them, with my company, Ahura AI. And what they do is they build this AI tool that helps you evaluate your resume and, you know, figure out the gaps between your resume and the job description you're applying for. And then you either figure out if you want to go pick up that skill, which is where you use our platform, Ahura AI, that helps you pick up skills faster, or you already have that skill. You just need to write it better in your resume. So check it out. A second piece message I'll share is around comparing and contrasting working for a large company to a startup. Both are awesome and have pros and cons. You just have to figure out where you are in your career. With a larger company, I think there's, you know, more structure, and there's a strong potential to go really deep in a particular topic, because you typically get one project, if you're lucky. And yeah, you can go very deep if your manager is great. So that's cool. But then contrast that with the startup, which there is less structure. There are a lot more things to work on. So you probably work on 4, 5, 6 different you know, spaces. And so that gives you an opportunity to learn quickly what you don't like and what's not for you, and hopefully bring you closer to where you're supposed to be.
Thanks so much, Alex. That's very useful. Eleanor?
Yeah, thank you. So Michael and Alex have given really practical advice. So I'm going to pull back and give a little bit more high-level advice. I think I have an answer that's really uncommon. So first, I think that there are some things that are really important pillars of a lot of data science work that are sometimes overlooked. One is domain knowledge, and one is, to return to my theme, working with people. I think domain knowledge, it's very important, I think, often to understand the thing that you're analyzing, or at least a way to incorporate the knowledge of experts. And I think that that can be undervalued in data science. And I've seen a lot of people make errors or even just make unhelpful models because they weren't aware of the full landscape of the subject that they were working in. You know, just to give one example, I worked with a group of students who were working, had wanted to work on kind of like a real world data project in an area of the city. And they, you know, they kind of were led by this data set, right? What features did it have? But it turned out that there was a whole other important factor that wasn't in the data set, and the model they made was not useful. So I think you can either go the route of being a domain expert yourself. For instance, maybe if you're one of those working professionals in this audience, you know, and in general, I think people will love if you combine domain expertise plus data science skills. I think also you can go the route of being a generalist, which is what I am, but then you have to make sure that you really have the ability to work closely with subject matter experts and incorporate their knowledge. So that kind of leads me to the other important thing, which is, I think, again, you know, this isn't for all data science, but certainly is for the work that I do. And I think for a lot of data science, which is being able to work with people and kind of understand people and the environment that we're in. So my work in particular focuses on our communities, but a lot of data science work, it is in the world in some way, right? So my advice that I think is uncommon is I strongly urge people to, in addition to data science, study the humanities. And I think this applies in so many ways. So for one thing, ethics. Just because you can build a model doesn't mean you should. I'm sure that you've heard of models that, for instance, suggest harsher prison sentences for Black people than for white people who have the same crime and history. Like, you have to think about these things. And I've been startled by the number of undergrads I've worked with who told me that their classwork never touched on data ethics. You have a powerful tool, and it is not responsible to not know how to use it. So often, another way that this applies is you'll often be studying something that relates to people and our environment, which means that you need to understand how your work fits in with it. So whatever it is that helps you understand the world, I highly recommend taking at least a few courses in that. So for me, it's history that really helps me understand why things are the way they are. Maybe for you, it could be poetry or literature. You should study that. And then finally, you know, again, techniques is important, but I'm like in my work, I'm really interested in working with people who can put their work in context. So, you know, I said this before, but to kind of pick up on that, it feels like our work can maybe be over once we spit out some numbers, but really, I think that's just the beginning. What do we do with those numbers? Does that mean we should yell at people? Does that mean we're doing something well? Does that mean we should change? We need to understand how our work fits in. And then one kind of thought that I'll just toss in there to consider. We heard from Michael and Alex about how hard it can be to get a position. I work in a position that's really not considered prestigious, I would say. Most people, when they think of data science, don't think of cities. And in some ways, I urge people to think about the less prestigious positions, because I think you can still do really interesting, meaningful things without having to send 300 cover letters and jump through a bunch of flaming hoops. So that's always kind of been my interest. And Michael and Alex, this isn't a pointed comment in any way, but just something like urge people to think expand their horizons. And then, of course, the last thing is real world data work, but I think others have touched on that.
Thanks so much, Eleanor.
And then,
Alex?
Yeah,
Right.
if I could very quickly, if we're allowed to place votes, I'll vote very strongly on Eleanor's first answer on context, having context. It's, for me, one of the most important things in data science this decade is having context. And so for everyone working on teams, I would say, if you don't have, you must have at least one person who's a domain expert on a project you're working on if it's supposed to go in front of real people. If it doesn't, stop building the tool.
Yeah, I
That's an
completely agree
interesting
with that as
take.
well, especially because I build things for the direct engineers that are trying to predict failures and things. So I luckily don't need to have the direct domain knowledge a lot of the time, because I can then just ask them for clarification, but you need to have that, or else whatever you're building, it's not useful.
Right, Emily, we've heard some thoughts about this. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with all the answers so far, kind of piggybacking off Eleanor's, like, look at the places that might seem less prestigious. I think that's not just the organization you're working for, but also the job title. Sometimes I've seen folks really fixated on, like, I need the data scientist title, whereas a lot of other roles, like maybe, data analyst or marketing analyst, right, use a lot of those same skills. And, and again, if you still want to be like a data science or maybe do machine learning work at some point, getting those real world data skills, maybe that don't involve machine learning, but around pulling data, understanding data, that stakeholder communication can be really, really valuable. And I think the second part is your network. I think some of that can come from undergrad, like your classmates or maybe your professors, but I do think it's a little easier to build once you have that first job. And kind of the way I built mine, and that I found worked really well for me, was doing public work. So giving talks, writing blog posts, and people kind of started to know me or come up to me, maybe folks that I admire. And that was just a really good way for me to build connections. And I gave my first talk, I think about 8 months into being working in data at Etsy, because even though that was, fairly soon, I gave a talk on called A/B testing in the wild, basically what I'd learned coming from understanding statistics and experiments as they're run, at a university, to having millions of people online, and then these practical business concerns as well. So that's always, what I recommend to folks, along with, again, being flexible. And, also if you're currently working, I always find even if you're not in a data type role, can you find, most roles have data relevant some way, right? And can you find that way and start up-leveling your data skills on the job?
Right. These are great points, from keep applying to domain knowledge to learning about the humanities and applying to other domain sets that are not easily identifiable by people on the team. Thank you so much to the panelists for sharing these insightful thoughts. For me, these have been very exciting, and that was the final prepared question we had for our panelists today. So our panelists have again agreed to now take some of the questions that you have been typing into Slido. I will go ahead and interestingly, Jason, okay. Got it. Just pulling up the questions. Okay, so the first question, and there's no order to this, so panelists, please feel free to go in whatever order. The first question is, any advice for folks in the position of postdoc or final year PhD who intend to stay in research? Example, research institute, but do not intend to pursue an academic career.
I can try a little bit, but this is just, I feel more comfortable applying someone who wants to, has a PhD, but wants to like kind of fully leave academia into industry. Next to my co-author, Jacqueline Nolis kind of did that. And she wrote a blog post called Escaping the Academic Trap, which is more around like how, working in industry looks different than working in academia. It still might apply, even at, even for like research heavy positions, but unfortunately, I just have like a pretty different background than that.
Other thoughts? Thanks so much, Emily.
Like Emily, this isn't my background, but I can pass on some experiences from friends who have been in this position. I have a friend who is actually a big proponent of people leaving academia just based on her own experiences. And I think the number one thing that she emphasizes is that she feels like working in industry, it's much more about getting results. And that is something that really she really enjoys.
Other thoughts, or should we just move on to the next question?
Would be a pass from me. I don't have much to share on that one.
Sounds good. Michael, want to add anything to this?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a very specific question.
Mhm.
So the next question is an interesting one, and it's, what is the future of data science and software engineer by ChatGPT?
Does this mean like given ChatGPT exists?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so too. I'm thinking with the onset of ChatGPT, does that mean software engineers and data scientists are going to go out of a job? Is this something that gets incorporated? What do you think the future looks like?
You go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Well, it has some significant inherent problems right now, ChatGPT. Some being that it has no idea what it's saying. So it frequently gives wrong answers. And yes, I've used ChatGPT and was very surprised about its coding ability, which helped me actually answer a question I had at work. But the more you learn and the more you grow, you can start using it as a tool and instead not be afraid of it taking over positions, if that is actually the question. So a lot of people think, oh no, my job's gone. Well, if you continue learning and growing, you can then use that to figure out how to do things that you couldn't do before. So I would look at it more as a tool if it does continue to get better as more than a competitor. But I mean, right now it's got some problems that it doesn't know where it's pulling the data from. So it's getting like I've heard some instances of it getting classified data. Obviously something's been wrong, and it picks up biases that it reads from the internet. So if there's any sort of hate speech or anything wrong or mean or something on the internet, it will spit that back out. So it has no way of figuring out what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. So I don't think in the near future it would be 100% great, but I think of it more like in terms of working as a tool that we can learn to use.
Right, exactly. That's sort of where I would lean towards as well, where it's not replacing the job. You who has that job, you should identify ways you can use it to learn faster, right? Things you haven't done before, you use it to get examples, and then also to execute faster. Just identify the pieces that you can do well and use that to move faster. You could tell that more about speed. So you do things faster, you outcompete. And that's where you should use it. Another limitation of it is, I mean, it's trained on data, right? Which is the past. So it's not looking at the future. There's going to be new approaches and new ways of doing things. So you obviously need software engineers to write that new knowledge into the internet. So it's not replacing jobs. Instead, you should identify how to help you go faster.
So far, we have leveraged ChatGPT as a tool, and also that software engineers are not going anywhere because we are going to build the future. Other thoughts from folks?
I don't know if this example completely fits, but I'm just thinking back to other companies that have been replaced by technology and thinking of, I don't know if anybody knows the bookstore Barnes, or no, it was Borders. It's my favorite bookstore growing up, and it went out of business. It was massive. They had chains everywhere, but it didn't do something that Barnes and Noble did. So the technology came around the internet with ebooks. Barnes or Noble invested in it, and Borders didn't. So I think ChatGPT can be, understood as the same way. Either you can completely ignore it, and you might get passed by, or figure out how to use it for your own use.
So if you
Right.
can quickly repeat the name of the other company. So it's Barnes and Noble. What was the other one? I like the example.
Borders.
Borders. Okay.
Yeah, favorite bookstore growing up. Went all the time. It was awesome. It was bigger than Barnes and Noble, and then disappeared overnight.
Mhm. I actually remember I was a Borders fan too. Their website actually redirected to Amazon for a time, which seems like a bad decision in retrospect. Just to add to what you said, definitely a theme of what I've said so far is that I do a lot of work with people. And I think that that is an aspect of data science that would be very hard for ChatGPT to replicate. Maybe in the future there's some, I don't think ChatGPT is near this now, but maybe in the future there's some version of ChatGPT where I can say, these are my circumstances and I need you to tell me the best privacy policy. But even if it does that, how do I get people to agree to it? How do I get the right people in the room to talk about it? I don't think ChatGPT can do that. I also don't think it's going to be very good for a long time at saying, I sort of have this uneasy feeling about this thing. Maybe you could look at that with data to like, here's our scoped project and here's what we're going to do. It can't get me access to data sets that are sensitive, all those things. So I think the human element of data science is still very much here to stay. And I think that even a hypothetical future, really excellent ChatGPT can ease some of that, but will not be able to replace it.
It is definitely reassuring to hear that data scientists are not replaceable. That makes me feel comfortable. Unless there's anything, I'll move to the next question. Okay, so the next question is, do you have any suggestions for finding a job in data science? My background is in statistics, and I have research experience in data analysis.
I feel a little silly saying this, but I do have kind of a book sort of around that, kind of because I got asked a lot of questions around that, and a podcast. But I think it's kind of like what we're going back to, just for anyone, is like having that. It's going to be like a pretty personalized answer. I mean, it's sort of, the question is, okay, where are you finding issues? Have you started applying? Are you not hearing back from your resume? Are you getting those initial calls but not advancing? Are you finding that you think you really do have relevant experience, but you're not conveying it? Or do you find that, oh, actually everyone's asking me, tell me about a machine learning project you've done end to end and you haven't done that, right? And in that case, maybe it's figuring out, okay, maybe applying to different types of data science jobs that have more of a statistics and data analyst focus than maybe an ML engineer job. But then the last point of just being like that network. So I've actually been on the job search again for a full-time job, and fairly saturated, more unusually saturated, I would say, senior market, just with all the layoffs. And I've had I have had a few places, some callbacks from cold applications, but I've been much more successful where either folks have reached out to me because they know my work, or I've reached out to my network when I've seen that they have a job and I'm able to get a referral. So if you're able to, it sounds like you already have enough relevant experience to start building that network, maybe by going to meetups, maybe trying to speak if you can, or, write some blog posts. Like, let's say you realize, oh, I really want to learn. I haven't done stuff with Git. I see that's coming up using version control. You could write a little introduction to Git blog posts, or like, hey, here's how I learned this, and here's a project that I did with it. But yeah, those are just some initial ideas. But like I said, it's going to be a little bit personalized to you based on where you're finding kind of the roadblock in your search for a job.
And I would even say taking those kind of actions Emily is saying so critical that it can improve your, I don't know what numbers are, but I want to say 5 to 10x better response rate if you do those things. right? Writing blogs, getting out there, being a voice, as showing your portfolio. These are all very, very critical things that hiring managers and HR are looking out for when they're looking for who to interview or who to give the job to.
Yeah, I would say networking is a big thing, and it's very difficult for people still in college to get people to actually listen to them. But I got an internship this summer after my sophomore year because I just found people doing really cool things for startups. Trying like different companies because I'm from New York, so I just Googled all startups in New York, and then I went on their LinkedIn pages, found employees, and reached out directly. And it's actually how I had somebody at that company who's ironically leaving the company, but he liked what I was saying, and he put my resume on the top of the pile before he left. So it was networking and talking to people sometimes gets you past that initial stage of the resume.
Think, in addition to what the others have said, I think of one of the things that Emily was talking about with prestige and different job titles. So, maybe if you're having trouble getting the call back for that data science role, but if you have research experience in statistics and analytics and statistics, there are a lot of jobs where the title is something like analyst, and there's a lot of room to grow and to do data science and to develop that work portfolio and to take that, after you have developed that, to take that to the next level. There are very few jobs I find where people are like, no, absolutely do not do data science. I do not want you to do that. So, also think of places where you can grow.
Awesome. Think of places you can grow. Oh, sorry, Michael.
Well, to Eleanor's point, I actually was hired as a software developer for my internship, but I expressed my interest in data science, and they helped me find projects to work on that, so that when I was hired as a full data scientist who also happens to do some software developer things. But so yeah, finding a place where you can grow and maybe change your existing job title kind of is a good idea as well. Mm-hmm.
Right. Michael, just a quick follow-up question to that. I'm sure people are wondering how easy that transition from software engineer to data scientist.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got lucky because my manager and my boss are very supportive. But data science is something I had as the job I wanted. So when I had gotten an internship, I was lucky to take anything that I could get. But then once I got there, I realized that if you can provide value for the company in any way, they're happy to have it. So if you get there and start performing some data science tasks and go like, hey, this might work, they're very happy to take whatever works and work with you to, or at least in my experience, to move your position slightly over.
Awesome, thank you. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to this. Well, we have time, so I'll move on to the next question. And it is, do you have any suggestions for a free in caps AI-powered tool that can help improve a resume based on the job description? I guess, Alex, you might have started this, and I'll probably ask you to start answering this first.
Definitely. I think I already answered that with that tool. I think there's several such tools, so you can do a Google and find others, but Hiration was pretty impressive when I saw it. They've now partnered with several universities, so working with the career management centers to put Hiration in front of the students. So yeah, check it out. They do several things beyond just resume gap analysis. Something else to do is interview prep, where you speak to the tool for 5 to 10 minutes. It helps you give a judge of your posture, your voice tone, and things like that. There are 4 components of it. Check on their website to see what else is there.
Thanks, Alex. Any of the panelists have a free AI-powered tool they can recommend?
It's not AI powered, but I would say if you're at a university, definitely use your career services, right? They should have general tips on writing a resume. I'm sure also if you brought like, hey, here are the types of jobs I'm applying for, can you help me have my resume be a better fit, that they can help you with that. And then if you're out of university, again, this is kind of where like a network comes in handy, right? If you built a network, if you have friends in the industry, especially if they've been hiring managers, but even if not, then you can ask them give you some feedback on your resume. So those aren't AI-powered tools, but also, that you can use people as well to hopefully help you make a stronger resume.
Right. Who needs artificial intelligence when you have human intelligence?
Exactly.
Eleanor, I see you're muted.
I also have a plug for a non-AI tool. I am a devotee of a workplace advice blog called Ask a Manager. I think she gives fantastic advice for a variety of situations, and I would recommend it to people who are starting or not starting in positions about all sorts of things. But she also has really excellent resume advice, and I would highly recommend it to everyone.
Oh, Michael, I see you're muted, and thanks, Emily. I did see you posted the link to what Eleanor was talking about. Michael, I see you're muted. Did you want to add anything to this?
Well, I just, from my own experience, on top of AI help, reach out to your friend. I had a lot of help with my friends because you're both doing the same experiences, but you might not realize, oh, I can actually put that on my resume, because I had a bunch of projects for class. I was staying school and class, but a bunch of projects for class that I'm like, oh, that's not that impressive. And then I had one friend rephrase them, and I'm like, wait, those are kind of impressive. And then so I realized that you can start putting down classwork and things that you don't think a company would like, but they do. So I reach out to your friends, see what they're doing. Maybe they can have some good advice as well.
Awesome. Both AI and HI. Other thoughts on this question before we move to the next one? Awesome. So the next question is, how useful do you think various data science boot camps or certification are to build credentials?
My manager actually told me when I was, after I got hired, that it's not exactly dependent upon what certifications or boot camps you do, but the fact that you're doing them, that you want to learn more, and that you show that you are interested in something. Like I remember specifically, he said, in my junior year, I was double majoring, and I loved both topics, computer science, computer engineering, but I really wanted to focus on computer science and specifically data science, machine learning. So I got to all my classes, and I'm like, none of these are data science or machine learning. Like this is not really what I wanted to do. I had to take more math and do other things. So on top of my classes, I got a certificate from Coursera in machine learning. It was hard, but I dedicated a Saturday morning to it for maybe a month or two. And then in my interview, they asked me more about that than they did my actual whole degree, because they saw that it showed that I was interested not just in school, but actually genuinely interested in the topics. So I wouldn't say what certificate you're getting is important, but that you are trying to get them because you're interested.
Very interesting take, Michael. Other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be helpful. So I actually did a data science bootcamp between my master's degree and starting at Etsy. But I was kind of in the fortunate position. I could live at home. I was coming off of having just kind of a small stipend in grad school. So it wasn't like I had previously been having a real salary. And it costs money, right? And so I think you really have to figure out, is the ROI worth it? And kind of looking back, I mean, I learned a lot, but I hadn't actually tried applying for data jobs before doing this bootcamp. I went basically like a week after graduating school. And I think maybe I would have done that because maybe I could have been just successful. But I would say the certifications can show, you're a motivated learner, you're interested in this stuff. But also I'd say more important maybe is just the skills you get. And I don't think anyone really cared that I did this data science bootcamp, but it was but I learned Git, right? And that helped me with my interviews, or I had a project portfolio and that helped me, but I could have done that without paying for the bootcamp.
Right. Thanks, Emily. Other thoughts?
I guess I find a boot camp or credential useful in combination with other things that you might have. And there's a wide range of boot camps. I have not had great experiences with people who, learn all of data science in 1 month or less, and I have, no other experience. But, I think as a way to delve into a certain topic, or on top of, other experience you might have, I think it can be quite useful. And to be clear, I think it can integrate nicely with a broad range of experience. I'm the person who just told you to study the humanities, but like really kind of making that connection and not just saying you should hire me because I've studied this thing for 1 month. Again, and there's a wide range. Some boot camps are really like you go into depth, you learn a lot of things. Some are a little bit like promising to teach you all of data science in 1 month or less.
Yeah, I look at them at the same way, where it helps you get started in a new space, right? You talking to people who say they know what they're doing, and they for 10 weeks or so, they give you some structure to start learning, and then you go deeper yourself by reading or by doing projects and doing different things. But at least this gets you started if you would like to have that guidance.
Yeah, it's definitely like an opportunity for you to get, have a better knowledge of what is out there. And I remember in my interview, I said to my manager, like, I have a good experience with databases. I took a class. I've done some things outside. And he just stops me. He's like, it's okay that you think you have experience, but you don't. And I'm like, I got all scared. I'm like, what does he mean? And he's like, we run the largest databases to ever exist. So I know you have no idea what you're talking about, but I love to see that you're excited about it. So yeah, these boot camps and certificates really just show you what's out there, and then you try to read into it more and understand more outside of them.
Right. Great responses. I really, really love them. Other thoughts on this topic? We have about 9 more minutes, so I'll squeeze in a few more of these questions. The question is, how do you stay up to date in this ever-changing field?
I think that's a great question. And it's something that I spent an hour today on a call within my company of them trying to explain a new framework that just came out. So continued learning is something that's important, but also I think it might be better to understand an existing tool very well than to go and try to be on the latest tool every time. Because you can do a lot of stuff with the existing tools that you can do with the new ones. The new ones might have new bells and whistles, but documentation for the older stuff, it might be more helpful or easier to learn. So continued learning is a great thing, but always trying to be on the newest thing might actually be a hindrance because you spend more time doing that than actually building whatever you need.
Right.
I can share that we actually built our entire company around this premise of continuous learning. That's all we do, right? And our simplest advice is schedule 30 minutes every week to just research and look up what's out there. It could be a book that you're going to read, or a Twitter feed that you follow, or some news channel you look at, or if you have the money, you attend some conference, right? That will probably take you more than 30 minutes to go to a conference, but at least 30 minutes every week, you should learn something new. And our business is built around figuring out how to help you track all the new things you're learning. So 6 months later, you can say, all right, here are the big 4 things I've learned, and this is how it can help me get a better job or get closer to the kind of impact I want to make.
So I'm a big fan of kind of like just-in-time learning, because it's like with a good foundation, just because there was so much you could be learning anytime, right? It's not even like there's one problem, like stay up to date, what's the latest thing in deep learning, but like, it's also like, well, should I be learning forecasting, right? Well, what about this data science problem? What about that one, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many. So, I think just recognizing that learning on the job is part of it. And so, my last job, like when I roll on the centralized data science team, the first project I worked on was a forecasting project. I hadn't done forecasting before, but I had like a good foundation in R. I was familiar with, also getting to know like what if I did need to learn this, what are some resources, right? So getting the lay of land. So I'm like, I know that Rob Heinemann has written I've never read it, but has written a textbook on forecasting in R, and it's even online for free. So I kind of knew where to get started. Or I know, deep learning stuff. I know Francois Cholet has written a great deep learning book, and like Keras and TensorFlow is the most popular package, right? And then you could figure out if you do, again, if the project needs it, maybe you go really deep into deep learning. But in my case, I didn't need to go read all the newest research papers, right? I could just sort of see, hey, can this image classification algorithm AWS offers out of the box. Can I use that? And I learned about like hyperparameter tuning, like what's a mini batch size, all of that stuff, but I didn't need to go read a bunch of research papers. So at least that's helped me from keeping, I guess, getting very overwhelmed with just how broad and deep the field can be.
Yeah, Emily, I really like the way you said that, there's an infinity of things that we could be learning. But kind of at the start of each project, I always encourage my team to kind of leave the jargon out of it as much as we can. And how would we like to approach this project? And then we think, well, what are the right tools and techniques? And maybe there is something new that we need to learn. So in fact, when I'm hiring, that's something that I look for, is not just who knows all of these techniques, but who can learn all of these techniques. So I think what you said is exactly right. Having enough awareness of the landscape to kind of know what's out there, but then being able to go deep or shallow when you need to.
Know when to go deep or shallow when you need to. That's a good one. I don't know if there are other thoughts on this topic. Awesome. Well, to the, oh, sorry, Michael.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute while it gets stuck. I just dropped a good newsletter in the chat that me and my manager, spit back and forth to each other whenever we see an interesting article that we might be able to use. So this has got some good stuff in there too. If you guys want, it's like an email every day for free. So.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that, Michael. The next question is, what communication and technical skills are essential in your workplace?
I think, so I'll start with like the communication stuff. At least when I've worked, it's a broad variety of communication. So there's communication with the teammates that you're working with every day. And maybe that's like a stakeholder team. So in my case, it might be like keeping them up to date on the A/B testing process, how an experiment's going, or maybe ask, sometimes need to be proactive and say, hey, what's coming up on the roadmap, be in their team meetings, contributing to meetings. There's the communication of managing up to your manager, right? So if how do you continue to grow? How do you let your manager know what you're doing? How do you get the help that you need from them? And there's also, maybe a little more common as you get a bit more senior, but also presenting to leadership, right? So how do you present to executives? And, for example, how do you make very succinct communications? Do you send a pre-read? How do you learn about what people care about? It's like at my last job, making a document for the e-commerce team on this machine learning model I built. That was like just basically a one-pager that was like brief description of like, what's the problem I'm solving with this? How's the model looking? And here's how much money we could save if we roll out this model, right? Because that's how the e-commerce team prioritize projects. So I would say like just really a wide variety. And also, again, it's something that, I'm still making mistakes and I'm still improving, even like 6 years in, right? You'll just continue to grow. One size does not fit all for everyone you work with, although you can learn kind of tips and tricks that in general will be helpful. And then for technical skills, again, it just really varies. I would say most data science stuff are like either R or Python along with SQL is kind of the bread and butter. But like at Etsy, I use Scalding to, access, there's some like data in Hadoop. That I've never used Scalding again, or some of the companies I worked for have used Looker, which is like a BI kind of like dashboarding tool. So I've used that. That doesn't apply in other companies. And same thing within those packages, like I said, right? I use forecasting packages in R, and this one position hadn't used it before or since then, right? But I do think this sort of bread and butter stuff along with R, Python, SQL within those is being able to like get a data set, like fetch the data, explore it, like make some graphs, right? Those are really kind of the foundational skills. And then again, you can build on from that, whether that's statistical models, whether that's writing a report, whether that's machine learning.
Okay. I can go quickly after that one. First thing is to second what Emily has said. I always give that as my response, that communication is the #1 most important skill for all the reasons Emily mentioned. The one I'll add to that then, since she's taken that, is more of the process of talking to your audience or the user of your product or whatever it is you're building as soon as possible, right? There is a tendency for people, especially folks in engineering, the more technical you are, the less likely you are to actually want to talk to anybody. that this is a tendency, right? It doesn't apply to everyone. But the general thing is you lock yourself away somewhere and build for months and months, if not years, and eventually show it to the person you're building it to. I'm here to say, please don't do that. In fact, talk to them loads before you actually start building.
Yeah, I think the biggest communication skill that I had to learn was to just ask for help. If you don't know how to do something and you can't figure it out, there's not a problem to ask for help. I thought I was, when I first joined the company, that like, you know, I got hired for this job. I know or should know everything about it. It's not at all true, especially with my company. It's so big. I will never learn every acronym here. It's just not possible. So yes, try to do all the things you can, you do know how to do, but if you get stuck and you can't figure it out, ask for help, because otherwise you'll be stuck doing that same thing for a long time, when if you reached out, it could have been done in 5 minutes. And in terms of technical skills in the workplace, I would say get on every project that you have no idea how anything works about it, because there you're exposed to as much as possible and you will learn along the way. So try not to get scared of new things that you've never heard of. Just try to do everything possible. I would even pick a project that I have no idea how to do over one I do know how to do, because it's a bigger challenge and you get to learn more. So.
That's a very interesting take, Michael. Alex, I see from you.
I was going to ask a question because I don't know the solution to this one. I think the asking for help comment is so important, and thankfully I've come to a place where I'm able to leverage that. But I've definitely observed that people from minority groups really don't do this, right? Whether it's based on gender or it's you're from a community of color, you just have this feeling that there's already a bias against you and you don't know what it is you're talking about, or you don't deserve your role until you don't ask for help. So I don't know the solution to that and how you can combat that. It'd be great if anyone on the panel has some advice.
Yeah, I think that's tough. I think especially because that's not always an inaccurate belief, right? I think there definitely are times when people will take that as, oh, I knew she wasn't technical, or I knew he, he didn't know what he's talking about. So I think it's kind of on the flip side of really trying to build a culture for the other side of psychological safety, of the trust that you can admit when you make mistakes or when you don't know things. And honestly, that's something I always look for in companies, that they don't, or there isn't this kind of brilliant jerk phenomenon, or, we're always trying to show off how smart we are. Yeah, so I think that's kind of one thing, is just like, and if you're part of an environment of, not contributing to that and being the other way, and right, and making it clear that it's okay to admit you don't, and maybe if you are, say, like a senior cis white man, maybe leading by example as well, and admitting stuff, and, calling out if you see folks being, being judged as like for asking a question, when that same, person, someone else who, wasn't a minority in some way wouldn't be judged in that way.
Yeah, I just thought of an example. I was hired and they kept throwing around one acronym that I had from context clues figured out was like my division, but I had no idea what it stood for. So I didn't know a division that I was working for, and I was too afraid to ask what division we were working for. So it took me much longer than I care to admit to figure it out, but it could have been fixed in 30 seconds if on the first day I just said, hey, what does TSE stand for? So yeah, just try not to be afraid of asking questions that might be perceived as stupid. I got hired in that division and I didn't know what it was named. It didn't mean I wasn't capable of doing things, tasks along the way, but those the simple things that you just might not know. You could be going to college forever and not know a very simple thing. It's just how it works. You got to be okay with asking questions, no matter how stupid, even if it is, what division do we work for?
I think those are all some great answers. The thing that I would add that has been a very key element for me in the work that I do, and maybe this is different from others because I think I have a lot of contact with non-technical people, but building trust, just being able to invest in that relationship with other people, whether they're on other teams, whether they're inside or outside. data has been used in a lot of ways that range from inaccurate to downright harmful. And I think a lot of people who have worked with data scientists have had the phenomenon of someone saying, I'm so smart, give me all your data, and I will come back and I will tell you the answer. And like really not being consulted at the beginning, middle, or end of that. And so a lot of the work that I do is build trust with people to say, I take your concerns seriously. You know, ethics is very important. Of course, I'll consult with you. You know, and also, why is it good to use data in the first place? And why is that helpful? And what, you know, what are the benefits, and honestly, what are the drawbacks of what we might do here? So just being able to kind of invest in that relationship. When I was in my first position out of college, I believed in data, and I was very impatient with people who didn't. And I just thought, like, of course we should cut to the chase. The technical part is the most important part. That's what we need to focus on. And now I spend most of my day talking to people and building trust.
That is a very interesting perspective, all of you. I don't know if there's anything anyone wants to add. Well, I do have a question here in all you're saying about the issue of communication. I think so far we've been looking at it from really the perspective of maybe someone trying to learn or someone on the team, but I think it would be nice to look at it from the perspective of a manager too, right? Because I do think, and a little bit of this has been mentioned, how do we say communicate exactly what we are trying to do as a team, right? Even before we actually start writing code, how do we establish those requirements and specifications, make everybody know exactly what you're doing? That includes the technical team and the non-technical team. And of course, as Eleanor, you did mention a little bit of this, establishing what we are going to accept as good and what isn't going to be acceptable, you know, getting those guidelines. How do we set those even before we start a project?
So there are very many suggestions that can be made. Maybe I'll just share my biggest one is around showing and not telling. So as much as you can show what great looks like, that saves a ton of time, right? Being able to show an example of how it was done before in ways that meet your requirements, that really, really does help people, you know, develop what you're looking for. The second piece related to that would be having your people know that you're open to seeing an early version of what they're building, right? The 10-20% version of what they're building, so that you can course correct in case there needs to be that. I mention that because I know that there are managers that would rather see something that is near complete. And by that point, too much time might have been wasted.
Thanks, Alex. Other thoughts on this?
My team has kind of a process that we've semi-formalized after quite a bit of practice, but we have what we call a project charter, and it's a formal document where we say who's doing what are we trying to do, why are we doing it, what is our timeline, and I think that just having that all written down in one place where everyone can read it is really helpful for guiding the project.
Alex, I see you from muted. Oh, so Michael, let's go with you since Alex has provided it.
Well, I don't have a lot of experience in the managerial position, but I do know that what's very helpful for my team is that we talk frequently. So we have at least one meeting per week, already scheduled, and then we have various pop-up meetings here or there to express blockers and have our manager help us solve them. So we had a problem, and then he's like, "Oh, well, this other team's already solved this problem, so you guys can stop that problem," because he's got a bigger view of the whole scope. So frequent communication, I think, it might be the best thing.
Right, frequent communication. Alex?
Yeah, what I was going to add is just experiment with different formats. The larger, the older the organization, the likelier there is an established process, like Eleanor mentioned, that has now worked for them for a good amount of time. But when it's a young organization, you have to experiment and be open to listening to the folks you are talking to, right, and how they want to receive information, so that they can work for you effectively. How that applies directly to us, there were people who wanted to receive text-based information on product specifications, and then there were other people, or even certain types of deliverables that it was better to use video, right? Literally recording a 3-minute video, would save us weeks of redeveloping pieces. So be open to different formats.
Awesome. That sounds great. So that brings an end to all the questions that were provided. I would just want to open it up if any person in the panelists wants to just say anything very briefly about all that we've talked about today, any additional thoughts, just really anything. I'll rephrase that question a little bit. How about you say anything to, I don't know how this applies to you, Michael, the younger version of you who was trying to find their first data science job?
No, I can maybe say some stuff because I was always afraid that I didn't have enough knowledge. So like maybe like what I could say to myself is whatever you have is okay as long as you express that you're interested and that you want to learn. Because they interviewed a couple people before me that just didn't show any interest. So they're like, well, if you're not even interested in this, why are we talking to you? So be interested and just try to learn as much as you can. But it is completely okay if you don't know everything. That's actually a better answer in a job interview, saying you don't know, than try to make up a ridiculous answer.
I think for me, like that, telling the younger version of myself, just reminding that like no one really has fun searching for a job. I certainly have not had that much. Maybe the initial conversations can be interesting, right? You learn about what does data science look like at different companies, but it can be like just a really discouraging process, a lot of uncertainty, right? A lot of waiting to hear back and all of that. So just kind of stick through it and also, try to lean on people when you can, whether that's, people in your life who have nothing to do with data science. But also, again, like that's another advantage of what I've really liked having the network is not just like, oh, it like helps me get jobs. It's also people to talk to, right? It's folks to commiserate with, or it's also to remind myself sometimes it's like, okay, like I can do this. Like I get to know folks at these companies, like Airbnb data science or these other things or directors or whatever. And I'm like, oh, they're also people too, right? And I can sort of, it lets myself see myself a little bit more and give myself a little bit more confidence that, okay, I as Michael was saying, as long as I'm kind of willing to learn, try to get that good foundation that, I am capable of doing valuable work for a company, and also that rejections don't dismiss that, right? It just might not be the right fit, or maybe sometimes also companies just have bad hiring processes and bad interview staff, or that's not on you.
To kind of add to what Emily was saying, it's getting rejected is part of the game. So you can get rejected a million times. It's got nothing to do with how good or bad you are. You just got to brush it off and keep going.
Definitely. I very, very much agree with that one. And after making a mistake so many times, one rule I eventually created was the interview should not be the first time I learn about what the interview is going to be like. You must have already prepared. You must have already, if it's a job you really care about, you must have spoken to at least one person, if not 3, about what the interview is going to be and feel like. Because there's times when you actually know the material they're going to be asking you about, but they are expecting it in a certain format, right? There's no way you would know that format if you didn't talk to someone else before. So definitely prioritize that, speaking to someone at the firm you're trying to interview with.
Yeah, and to Alex's point, being prepared for the interview, I would always just print out exactly the job description and then try to break them into questions that could possibly be answered in the interview. And if you get a question that you have like, I have no idea how to answer that, that's okay, but then don't leave it at that. Say like, I don't know, but I do know this about that topic, or I can get back to you with an answer to that specific question. So yeah.
I think these are all really good answers. Just to take this in a little bit different direction, I'll tie this back to what I said in the second question when I referred to the idea of a career jungle gym. Thinking back from where I sit now, I'm actually really pleased with all the moves I made. And I would say to people, trust your instincts. If you feel like this is not a place for you or a job for you, like, you don't have to suffer. And if this is something that you like and you want to do more of, like, also follow that instinct.
Awesome. Well, that brings an end to this session. And I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say we would like to sincerely express our gratitude to the esteemed panelists for their insightful contribution to the 2023 Data Science Research Career Panel. Your insightful thoughts and experiences have provided us with a deeper understanding of the challenges and opportunities in the data science sphere. Currently being shared right there is the contact information of our panelists for your reference, and we encourage you to reach out to them for further discussions. We also encourage you to provide your feedback on the session, as your opinions will help us improve and shape future events. We invite you to visit the Research Bazaar website to access the recording of this session and reach out to our panelists for further discussion. Thank you once again, and we hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.